Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Literacy View. We have a very special episode today, a breaking news episode with two experienced teachers with us today. Many of you know Sherry Lucas Hall and Dawn D. Lorenzo. I'll give you a little bit of background about both of them. So, Dawn is a dual certified general and special education teacher with 24 years of experience. She presently has a tutoring business, Lighthouse Literacy Solutions in New Jersey. And Sherry Lucas Hall worked in a school district for 14 years. And she now has a tutoring business as well in Georgia called Designed to Teach Tutoring Services. And both of their bios will be in the show notes, and we'll get started. So, the reason we're having this show is a result of our last episode when we had our badass moms and their teens. And both of our guests really responded quite strongly about it. And we started to engage in some conversations. And it was suggested that we would have an episode about teachers who speak up, get punished or written up, often for standing up for the kids. So there's an expression, no good deed goes unpunished. Well, that's what we're here to talk about today. So let's get started. Who wants to begin? Sherry, Dawn, it doesn't matter. And Sherry's like shaking her head. No, okay, we'll start with Dawn. And then
I'll jump in.
to Sherry. All right, Dawn, get us rolling.
Yes. So when I saw the badass mom episode, I was like shaking my head, especially the one mom who said that they were in an IEP meeting and it was the teacher who was like, I'm not leaving the table. I don't remember what she wanted, but I think she wanted them to specifically state that it was a specific learning disability, or maybe she wanted them to specifically say it was dyslexia. Now, I imagine that person was probably tenured. And I don't know what the tenure laws are in New York. I know they're very similar to New Jersey, but in New Jersey, it's 4 years in one day. I don't know if that's the same, Judy, if that's the same in New York right now. But with 24 years experience, I have been someone who has stepped away a few times because I too have a daughter who has special needs. And so she also has an IEP. So I've been on both sides of this table. And many people have said to me, you have to bring it down. You have to leave that special education mom hat off when you're in an IEP meeting. I can't tell you, ladies, I've really tried to be that very demure person who doesn't say anything at the table. It's just backfired every time. I'm biting my tongue. I can't do it. I've tried. I really have. And will they come right out and write you up for sticking up for a student? No, but they will start suddenly. Okay, you spoke up. This was not at my previous district, but the one before, there was a child who we were literally evacuating the classroom due to behaviors. But when you go into this child's IEP, there's no behavior plan. Is there a need for a behavior intervention plan? No. And so when you sit at the table at a meeting with all the powers that be, and you speak up and say, I'm sorry, but this would not hold up in court. You would all be in some serious trouble when you have a child that you're evacuating the room. But I look at his IEP and there's no behavior plan. That's not going to fly. And literally when we left that meeting, a colleague looked at me and was like, you're a goner. You're out of here. Right. It's horrible. And I hate the fact that our non-tenured teachers who come in and sometimes, yes, they're idealistic, but they have a lot to say. Some of them have the most important things to say, because what do they call that when you're nose blind to something? New people are not nose blind. They come in and they see stuff that the rest of us have all gotten used to. It's just the way we do it, right? And what do we tell our non-tenured teachers? Be quiet and keep your head down, right? Be quiet and keep your head down. So for me, I feel like, can you imagine doctors being discouraged or penalized when they're diagnosing sick patients? like doctors are not only charged with diagnosing the ills of their patients, but we also look to them to educate us, the patients and the families. How do I treat this? What are my options? And in other professions, you're given a level of authority along with the level of responsibility and a certain measure of accountability. But in teaching, you're the furthest from the locus of control. We have the least amount of autonomy within the system, but the greatest degree of accountability. So to me, we're not only demoralized, we're treated like infants. So if you're a leader letting go of a teacher or pushing out your highly effective teachers for something other than, misconduct, which of course, that's a reason for writing somebody up or letting them go. But if you're doing it because you have a highly effective teacher, but maybe they grade you the wrong way, you don't agree with how outspoken they are, you are hurting children. You're working in direct opposition to what is best for children in your district.
Whoa. You have a lot to say, and I can't wait to dig into that. I want to hear from Sherry. Sherry, baby, come on. Let's lose, Sherry. We need to hear from you. So, Sherry, you told me that your awakening happened after. It was not right at the beginning. It wasn't when you were actually with the students, but you knew that something wasn't right. And so you were asking questions. And I was in a similar situation because I also, and you both read my book, I did not know right away. But I knew something wasn't right. So could you tell us how your awakening happened and what you did about it?
I think for me, I wanted to teach. I knew that. I had no problem. I love being in the space. I love being with kids. But let's see, I pursued my master's and they let me teach while I was doing that. So I was in a classroom for 2 years with kids and I didn't have the master's. I just, I was pursuing it. And, it was kind of okay. I'm like, okay, I'm not good at this because I just don't know. And maybe when I finish, I'll get better. Right. That was my thought. And I did, I'm still reading your book and it was kind of like your story. And I read your story. I'm like, whoa, that's a lot like what I experienced. So after 2 years, I finished and I said, okay, I'm still not good at this. Let me just put my head down and teach. Took me 5 years to do that. I took the 5 years. And then I looked up 5 years later. I'm like, this is still not working. There's a whole lot that I'm missing. And I was teaching KN1. So I knew these were early learners. And there was more that I should have known, but I didn't. And I realized that, and I really started just doing some research. I started, finding websites to try and fill in the holes that I knew existed. But in doing that, I started asking questions. And I was asking questions about, how our curriculum was, what our standards were, and I think all my questions really did was make people uncomfortable. And because I hadn't been there long enough, I think, we were in a space where our leadership had kind of been changing a lot. We lost a principal, literally, she passed. And I think we had 3 or 4 after she passed. It was really not stable. And so I kind of could fly undetected, but I did start to ask questions like, there's something else I need to be doing. I don't know what it is, and I started to get an idea and I was starting to just ask questions. Shouldn't we be doing this? Maybe we should try this. And it was all for language arts. Of course, it was all for reading because that was my passion. And, I didn't get a lot of, confirmation about what I was doing, but I did have one principal that finally actually heard me. And she said, well, you try it. You can't get paid for it. I wasn't expecting to get paid. And I wanted to do it after school. And, she said you could do it after school. And so I really just pulled in extra kids from my classroom, try and get their parents' permission to see if I could do this after school for an hour. And the parents volunteered. They said, oh, okay. I had about, of the 10 students that I had struggling out of 20, about 5 of those students agreed, the parents agreed. And I was able to pull the kids in and start to really see all the stuff that I knew I didn't know. Right. I'm like, oh my God, this is working, but I know I wasn't doing that during the day. That wasn't what I had been practicing. That wasn't, what my master's degree covered. So I'm like, okay, then I need to be doing this during the day. But how do you do that when the standards tell you to do one thing, right? And the curriculum tells you to do one thing, and it's kind of against what you're starting to learn. that was called the science of reading that I didn't realize, right? And then I didn't find out about the science until my last year, 2018. But then it really started to get tougher because once I started realizing this was the science of reading and started to ask more questions, I started to see what was going on with my kids. I'm like, I need more help than this. The way we've got it's just not working.
And you can't turn the clock back.
No, I can't undo anything. But I realized that I needed more help than I was getting. And what I see, what I know happens in classrooms is often teachers don't get that kind of support. They don't get the support they need. You talk about that child that was clearing out the room. I had one that was tossing desks and challenging his classmates, and they would pull him out and leave him out for 20 minutes and send him right back to my classroom, right? Again, I suspect that he had dyslexia, but again, I knew nothing about dyslexia, not a thing. And so what was I doing? Dealing with what I had.
One thing that Sherry, that I've learned this last couple years is very often, especially because I work with fourth grade and most of my career has been like fourth grade to eighth grade, right? And by then you're seeing those behavior problems, right? And there are many times that I've thought, well, I can't get through to this child because if I'm going to throw the ball, you have to catch it. But if your attitude is one where I'm fighting you, right? I'm like, you think it's like, this is a behavior problem, but what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? It's not necessarily, it's that this child has been failed by the system so long that now they're manifesting behaviors. They're manifesting behaviors because they have been failed. How many parents have said to me, my child went in with a reading disability into special education and came out with a behavior disorder, right? Because we're not meeting their needs.
Exactly. So Judy, what do you have to say about this? Listening to our experienced teachers talk about their experiences with administration.
So first of all, I have to say, this is amazing. We have 4 teachers on the air tonight. This is crazy. This is amazing. Faith's story is my story. Sherry, the same thing happened to me when I read Faith's book. It was like, oh my God, that's when I fell in love with Faith, because I finally felt like everything that was going on in my life made sense. And, I think Faith's book really explains that the system is so broken. And a lot of it is really, it's the fault of the schools. For many years, we really, really got it wrong. And where have you two ladies been all my life? You are some badass moms. So it's like, or some badass educators. You are dynamic women. I love this. And I appreciate your honesty because, your stories speak to me. I'm still in the trenches doing this every day. And I have an interesting story. So last night, somebody very close to me sent me a video. And it was somebody in my family. And they were very joyful about this video. And the young man in the video, who I love dearly, who I've been giving phonics books to all during the whole summer, all of a sudden he's reading a book and he sounds like a fantastic reader. And little did my family member know that instead of writing back, I love this video and I'm so excited, it provoked me to start asking clarifying questions, because what I saw on the video was a balanced literacy book. And it looked and sounded so good. It sounds good. Words like bicycle in first grade, words like safely are in the book. Words like, you know what? I have the word list right here. Hold on. I'm going to read the word list right now. So, I felt bad. Here's somebody in my own family sharing this very special moment saying, oh my God, this is the best thing that ever happened since sliced bread. And I had to, and I'm like, Faith, do I tell her? Do I not tell her? And she's like, Judy, you have to. It's your obligation. She's going to say thank you to you later. So what I actually asked my family member to do is to put the words on a list in isolation the next night. And Faith, I didn't share the video with you, but it spoke volumes. And you know what? We're blessed. He was able to decode many of the words, but many of them weren't. And why was that? Is because Once those words were in isolation, A, those word patterns were not taught to that student yet. B, a lot of those words were probably decoded because the child was probably looking at pictures and getting those things through meaning. And that's my real concern with schools right now, is that they're doing this mixed bucket approach where they're doing a literacy block, where they're doing foundations, a sprinkle of foundations, a sprinkle of Hegarty. And then a lot of the schools are still not being fully transparent with parents. And maybe some parents still don't know, but they're doing a lot of loosey cooking still. And I'm seeing it everywhere. And I'm seeing it in districts that are claiming their science of reading districts. I'm seeing it in a district where Research Ed has come in and presented. I just want to give you some of the words that were in that book just for a second. Hold on a second. So these were some of the words that were in the text that I asked to be in isolation. Bicycle, this is beginning of first grade. Safely, ride, which has the silent E, ready, fixed, air, pump, and pumps. So it really makes you wonder, are schools really getting it right? We know about the science of reading. What's happening?
Well, it also depends on the student, because there are students starting first grade that can handle that. But clearly, once you checked, you saw that this
No, I saw that they could, but it was eye-opening, because schools are telling kids a mixed message, right? They didn't learn all these, so why are they getting these books? And yeah, I'm lucky. I think that my family member is going to be part of the 40% that reading is going to be really easy for them. However, that's not the case for a lot of our kids. So I'm hoping that schools are listening right now and don't have a mixed literacy block and get it right for those kids. Think about the books that we're sending home with those kids.
What I was seeing last year, Judy, was the district claiming we're moving toward SOR. And yet now they knew I was going to raise hell if I saw F&P books being tested because they were still testing the students with the Fontes and Pinnell. What is that? The BAS, right? The assessment system. And then
BAS.
Yep, the BAS. So then they said, well, we got rid of it for fourth grade. I'm not in the fourth grade. When I went down to the elementary school to give a professional development one day, I'm in one of the younger teachers' rooms, and I look over, and there's the F&P, the B. And I said, what is that? What's that? I go, wait a minute. We're moving to SOR, right? But you have the BAS.
Can I say something, Dawn?
Yeah.
Instead of BAS, we got to just take out the letter in the middle and call it BS.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the other thing, I don't know now, Sherry, are you in Georgia? You're in Georgia, right? Okay. So I don't know if this is happening in New York, but there's still a great hesitation to use the word dyslexia. I don't know. Now, we all know that they sent out that Dear Colleague letter. What was it back in, my God, 2015, the Dear Colleague letter from the Office of Special Ed Programs, right? And those of us that have, all these years experience, it's like being a doctor. I always use that analogy with the doctor's office, but it's true. You come in the office, he's heard this a million times. He's like, I can say, you have upper respiratory infection, whatever. When you're in this field this long, and I don't mean casually in this field, but like you're a lifelong learner, and this is like your passion, you can diagnose dyslexia pretty accurately, right? And there are kids who are being told that they have a learning disability, because that's one of the 13 areas that you can qualify for. But if you were to ask that parent if they know that this specific learning disability, not always, I'm not saying that's always the case, but do you know that your child has dyslexia? They'll be like, no, the school didn't tell me that. Now, I know that there are people who will say, does it really matter if you call it a specific learning disability or you actually call it dyslexia, right? I believe it does, because I believe you can't treat what you're not defining. And like I said, is it always dyslexia? No, but you better believe that if 1 in 5 children have dyslexia and 80% of all our special ed referrals are for decoding issues, there are quite a few parents out there not being told that their child has dyslexia. And you get a death stare. at an IEP meeting, you will get a death stare if you say the word dyslexia.
I think in New York that's changing. Sherry, you want to say something? You have to unmute yourself. Just unmute.
I just don't want to be rude, so I keep muting, stay mute. So I want to be rude. What I'm finding is that there's a challenge still to actually saying dyslexia. So if you're in an IEP meeting and you actually say it, or you are, okay, one of the instances is now that I'm doing the work that I do here, I've found that if a parent, because I go in to advocate for parents in their IEP meetings, what I found is that if a parent tells the school district that I'm coming, they send some kind of extra people to this meeting all of a sudden. But you wouldn't need to do that if you were doing what was best for students. You wouldn't need to send anybody extra just because I'm coming to a meeting, right? And what I'm finding also is that when we talk about dyslexia, when you have spaces, I taught in a school that was a Title I school. Most of the teachers are Black, most of the kids are Black and brown. When you have a space like that, if the teachers aren't better prepared, you know, a lot of the kids seem to have dyslexia because it's more so what we don't know as teachers than anything else. Like I said, I taught in that school for 10 years as a teacher. There was a lot I didn't know. I knew nothing about dyslexia. But now, once I stepped out of the classroom and I went to my first decoding dyslexia meeting, I read Overcoming Dyslexia. I started to realize that all of those kids, a lot of the kids that I had over the years had dyslexia, but because I knew nothing, there was nothing I could do. I didn't support them better. A lot of them ended up with behavior challenges, right? But that was, put it back. That was, sorry. That was, it wasn't dyslexia. It was that what I found out was there's a comorbidity of ADHD to dyslexia. We didn't know that. A lot of our kids were labeled with ADHD, but I can think now in my head, some of those kids that I knew, and I remember the challenges, it was signs of dyslexia. But again, I knew nothing. And if the teachers in the school don't know, there's no way to fight for children, you know, that are experiencing that if you don't have the knowledge. I checked back in with my former school and they were telling me that one teacher in the school was getting OG trained. One in the whole school? How's that supposed to help a group of kids from pre-K through 5? How's one teacher in the building supposed to help? If historically those students are being underserved, how is putting one trained teacher supposed to help them?
So Sherry, I just have a quick question for you. So how did the administrator show that he or she disapproved of your questions? So what actually happened?
It wasn't that they disapproved of my questions before I even came into the meeting. Once they found out that I was coming to the meeting, they added extra people to the parents' meeting. I was told that you know, she got one list, right? Before she mentioned that I was coming. Once she mentioned that I was coming, they sent an entire district person to the meeting to sit into the meeting while I was there. I'm like, had the list the day before the meeting, they sent an extra list to add another person, a specialist from the district. I guess, I don't know if she was there just to monitor what I was saying. I don't know.
I was actually thinking about even before you left the school. So while you were actually a teacher in the school, how did they retaliate or make you uncomfortable? Or what exactly did they do that you knew that your questions were not, you know, taken the right way?
I think it was more so of me challenging leadership anytime I ask questions. You know what I mean? If you're trying to step out of the box, you're trying to step out of line up to what we're used to doing. I would go. I hadn't been to many. I had been to a few IEP meetings. My issue with IEP meetings at that point, because I really didn't know much about them. I thought I should know more. Now I know I should have known more. I should have been a part of the IEP meeting. I would go to those meetings and I would share the work of the student, and then I would be dismissed from the meeting. I never realized that I was supposed to stay. I didn't know anything about IEP meetings. Nobody ever informed me. And so I remember a couple of years when I would go into these meetings, I would share whatever the work was my students were doing, whoever I had a couple of students that had IEPs already in kindergarten, right? I would go into these meetings, share the data that I had, and then I would be dismissed. They would tell me I could go back to my classroom. I didn't know I was supposed to stay.
And why do you think that you were
Faith, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt. Sherry being dismissed from the meeting is such BS.
I would agree, definitely.
Now I know, but again, right? While I was in the school building, there were a lot of things I did not know. You know, one, knew nothing about dyslexia. Two, knew nothing about IEP meetings. I remember being invited because a student came to my class and they already had the IEP, but I didn't know my role as a teacher in an IEP meeting. I never knew that.
And you were supposed to be an integral part of the team. And it is supposed to be a living document, and the conversation is supposed to be just that, a team conversation, you know. And I feel like they try to limit what you're going to say at the meet. I've been told, like, we're never quite sure what you're going to say, Dawn. And you know what? I don't either, because maybe the parent says something in the meeting that makes me go, oh, you know, maybe you should look into this or that. Again, we're not supposed to diagnose, but why is it not okay to say, I think you should speak to your doctor about this, you know, or
Were any of you, I just want to interrupt a second. Were any of you ever in a pre-meeting? Did you ever have one of those
yes,
where they have a
yes,
pre-CSE meeting? Do you know what I'm talking about?
ma'am.
Sherry's saying no, you're saying yes. So I'll tell you what my experience was. I've been called in before a meeting to kind of go over what the team is going to say so that everyone's on the same page. And that always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. It was like, okay, we want to make sure that everybody's going to keep in line and
Yes.
march to the same beat. And
Yes.
so this way there are no surprises. So
Yes.
I was wondering if anybody ever experienced that.
Yep. I had that last year, Faith, and this was one of those the S hit the fan type meetings, because let me tell you, the before meeting was really looking for what shouldn't be. Let's talk about what kind of placement would be best for this child next year, right? Let's get all the input. But the input that the teachers were giving was not input they wanted the parent to hear about. Right? Because this parent would then turn around and say, well, in that case, I want X, Y, and Z, right? And too many times decisions are being made based on what's available in our schedule. Where does this child fit in our schedule? Not what's best for what Johnny needs, right? But he has to fit into our schedule for the day. And
Go Dawn, go Dawn.
Yeah.
I got to cheer her on because this is the crap I see in the school.
Yep.
It's true.
You're talking
That
the real
is
deal.
true.
Yep.
It's everything is about what works for the schedule and the
Yes.
day. And it's the kids are last in that decision. I
Yes.
won't say everywhere, but
No.
and I've seen it done well. So again, I'm not saying everywhere, but often
Yes.
a lot of this is how could we make this convenient? And kids are grouped together, not by skill deficit,
Yes.
but because, oh, they all happen to have an opening at this
Yep.
particular.
Can I ask you guys something about something? I'm not licensed in special education. And what I see a lot in a lot of locations is something called bridge classes, where there's multiple grade levels in one classroom. And in general, I find that to be concerning because it's very hard to address the different needs of the students. Like, for instance, there'll be first graders and second graders, and then the teacher is told they have to teach phonics at a certain level, and maybe they don't have time to do 2 grade levels. And I'm seeing that as a big detriment, potentially, not at my site, but in general, to students, because, you know, there might be kids that are now being exposed to first grade content, but they're actually second graders and maybe potentially could handle that. So I'm wondering how you guys feel about that. Have you guys seen that in the field as well? And I'm just curious for everybody's input on such a scenario, especially when it comes to literacy instruction.
I have seen it, Judy. And legally, they can only do, I think it's 3 years. You can't have a gap larger than 3 years with students. But yeah, they've done it. And honestly, in my mind, it's that decision is what's the best. They cannot possibly justify it by saying we're grouping these kids together because research has shown this really works, right? This is a great thing for kids. No, it's how can I pay one special ed teacher for these two special education students in first grade and another special education teacher for these two special education kids in second grade? Why don't I just put them together? Right? And pay one special education teacher and a para.
In
That's
all
how I
fairness, though, in all fairness, sometimes it might work based, again, if it's according to skill. So I've seen things done
correct, but it's not
well,
always
and I've
the
seen
case.
things done poorly. So I don't want to lump everybody in that same group because,
agree.
you know, it really
If it's skill based, but honestly, you know, the whole movement has been also to expose kids to grade level content. So, you know, it just makes it, my point is that it makes it much harder for teachers. And my heart goes out to the teachers that have to teach in such a scenario because it's very hard, especially because, you know, yes, maybe some of those kids have similar skill deficiencies, but maybe in some areas they don't. And now the teachers who have a time crunch to cover so much material have an additional stressor on their plate. It is something that we have to just be aware of. It's not easy, you know, especially if you have, I think I've seen in my past years ago, a bridge class that had 3 grade levels possibly. That's hard.
That's the max 3.
Sherry, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I've seen it. I saw when I first started at my former school. It was, again, I was at a Title I school. They had at least, like you said, 3 grade levels, but that was in, when did I start? Around 20, it was probably 2008. So it was more like that. And then it stopped. Again, I was the parapro and there was a teacher in the classroom. So I was the parapro in the classroom there were at least 5 students and they all had different things that they needed, right? I don't know if you heard her, but yeah, all the kids had different things going on, and I've watched the teacher be, pretty overwhelmed, in the responsibilities. And again, what Dawn was saying is, it's harder, especially Judy was saying this. It's harder, especially when the teacher has no training, right? That's the issue. We're talking about the science of reading and structured literacy. Doing that kind of thing might work if you've got a trained teacher. But if the teacher doesn't have the training, if you've just moved the teacher from one space into this space and they have no training, it's very difficult for them to manage the students and make sure that they're getting what they need, the kind of instruction that they need.
So
And
I
sad-
will tell you that I had an experience in one building, and I don't know if you've seen this or experienced it, but I was in a building where there was a student of mine, and I was a learning specialist, and this particular child was not doing well in the group. This child was much further behind than the rest of the group. So I decided to use my lunchtime to help this child. And I was taking half my lunchtime to help the child. And I was doing it 2 or 3 days a week. I would just, say, all right, I'll do this. Don't you think I got into trouble for helping a child on my lunchtime because the union said, and this was a union thing, it wasn't an administrator, but the union rep came to me and said to me, you can't do that because then you're making everyone else look bad and you're setting a bad precedent. And then I was also told, which is really funny, if I wanted to do any work after work hours, which I like to do when the building emptied out a little, that's also a no-no, and I needed to leave the building. So, I don't know if anybody had that experience where it wasn't a principal, but the union was not pleased with me because I was making other teachers look bad if I wanted to take my own time to help someone.
That's the exact same story, Faith, that I had this last year. That was the beginning of the end for me, because this wasn't even a special education student. My kids were 4th grade, so they're still young enough that they think it's a great thing to have lunch with the teacher. Right? So my kids were like begging me, can we have lunch with you? We can have lunch with you. And I said, yes. And sure enough, those kids have besties, and then you end up inviting them too. And one of the besties had said to me, Miss D, I feel like when I'm reading in class, it's trash. Like I'm reading and I'm messing up all my words. And I said to him, I did a 1-minute fluency assessment. I didn't do a full out educational assessment on this kid. But wouldn't you know, it was the word that got out from other teachers that you're giving up your lunchtime, right? Word gets back to the principal, who then it goes to the director of special ed. She comes to see what's going on here. And are you instructing this child during lunch? And I said, listen, I made a deal with him. He wants to be here. This is great. My deal with him was, you're going to read with me then, and we're going to improve your fluency. That was all we were working on. Wasn't even a special ed kid. And I had reached out and told the mom, because I didn't want the mom being like, why is this lady keeping you from lunch? And he goes, no, Mom, I'm getting extra help. Well, 2 things, other teachers are not happy about this because it's a union thing, right? And also, what if we missed something and this kid ended up having a disability, a reading issue? And I said, I know when I tested this kid that wasn't going to come up, but they had a problem. Like, you test them. What if you found something we missed all these years? Everything is all about, we don't want to get sued. That's a big thing.
Judy, you're a coach, and I know it's hard for you to answer this question now, but just overall, were you ever in a position where, you could have been helping kids at that moment, but then you were asked to do something else instead of your job, instead of helping kids at that moment, that you're asked to do something administrative?
I have to say, for the most part, I mean, I've had my moments, of course. I've been in the classroom, then I was a reading specialist and so forth. I think that for the most part, administrators have seen that I'm so passionate about the work that I'm doing and how seriously I take it, that for the most part, that hasn't happened to me that often. It did happen sometimes, of course. It's all hands on deck because a lot of schools have high levels of absences. So on occasion, it has happened. But I have to say, when I had some serious conversations, it's been much less. It's not always easy for me, as Faith says, to put on my big girl pants and speak my truth. It's very hard. I'm much more assertive in my personal life with my boyfriend or with my parents. At work, I'm kind of like, sometimes it depends on the day. Sometimes I'm a pussycat. But once I, got serious and said, this is not what I want to be doing. I'm here for a reason. I want to make a difference throughout my career. For the most part, I feel like I'm really doing what I need to do. Like, even tomorrow, even though I'm coaching, I take my art, MTSS very seriously. I try to see kids for tier 2 MTSS, because I don't want to be that coach that's not getting down and dirty and working with kids. I need to work with kids, because what a hypocrite I would be if I'm coaching these teachers and telling them what to do if I'm not doing the heavy lifting too. And my building feels really serious about it. And my boss, he sent us coaches an email the other day, and the email said, make sure I see MTSS on your schedules. And I immediately texted back and I said, it's on my schedule. I'm on it. Nobody has to tell me to do it, because it's in my heart and it's in my soul. I'm going to make sure that I'm helping kids on a daily basis, because that's why I'm there. I'm not, I'm here for the
I could tell you that happens often, where there are special reading specialists, resource room people. They're pulled to be subs, glorified subs, or to do administrative stuff, and instead of working with the kids. Sherry, I want to ask you a question. So you mentioned before about Black and brown students. How did you advocate for them in terms of, what you saw in the schools. And we've spoken in terms of like you would see that they seem to get the short end of the stick sometimes, or the expectations are not as high for certain kids. And in doing this, do you think that administrators resented perhaps you talked up for certain kids, if you notice different things? I'm curious about that.
I don't know that administrators, for me, I think it's always, and you said this in your book, it's what leadership knows. It's what leadership knows that's going to guide that school and what's happening in the school. And when you have, I had some good experiences with leaders, and I had some bad experience with leaders. I think, when the leadership is not knowledgeable enough, right? You have things happening in a building that where teachers aren't supported, where, students don't necessarily come first. It's about who knows who in a building, right? You have a lot of that. So I think, it goes back to leadership always for me, especially now at this point, now that I understand. I think that our leaders have to be more informed so that they can really guide and lead the people, who they're leading. That's your responsibility. And I don't know how much training our leaders are getting. How do you lead a school if you don't have the knowledge that you need to make sure that your teachers get what they need, to make sure the students get what they need,
Yeah. I was thinking about a meeting that I was asked to go to, a CSE meeting. And
tell everybody what a CSE meeting is.
So Committee of Special Education, CSE. And I was asked to sit in on one. And it was for a little boy. And the school was not used to having an advocate come in. And I was acting as the advocate. And they were a little surprised when this family brought me in. And it happened to have been an African-American family for this little boy. And as soon as I was there, the tone of the meeting seemed to change. They felt very defensive. It was just a very different feeling. And, I wonder, are certain families at a disadvantage because they don't know, and how things could be different when you have an advocate or when you have that type of support? I guess that's what I was thinking about. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. That I've seen it over the time that I was in the school system, and what I didn't know, right? That my experience in the IEP meetings, that I was talking about, where I was allowed to go into the meeting, share my information, then told to leave. That's one of the things, I've since learned that that's not how that's supposed to be. And now that I'm going to IEP meetings as an advocate now, I see what you're talking about. I can go into a meeting and, everybody seems to be on some kind of, P's and Q's because now I'm in this meeting, and I think it's only because I've been vocal here in Georgia trying to say we've got to do better to serve our students. And how many parents know that they can have an advocate, that's not going to charge them, that's actually going into this meeting to support parents who really don't know. I'm going to be honest. I don't like what I see in Georgia, and the fact that, parents go into these IEP meetings and they go in, almost as if they're there alone. And it's the whole, you've got a whole room full of teachers that are there telling them, this is what's good for your baby. This is what's good for your baby. And the parents feeling like, but they're still not getting help. And I don't know what to do. And the school is the end all be all. We know everything. And what I'm learning is that they don't. But parents don't have the support they need in those meetings.
It's so intimidating, Sherry. It is so intimidating. I would cringe being at some of these meetings because, as you said, everybody's sitting around this table and this parent is listening to what each person is saying about their child. And it's so hard to really handle that yourself. So I want to throw something out to all of you. In our group, in our Facebook group, Judy, in the Literacy View group, there was a woman, Caitlin, who responded. So many people were responding when they knew that we were having this conversation. A lot of people chimed in and said, oh yeah, they get punished. So Judy, just mute a minute. Yeah, thanks. So Caitlin said this, that she was very upset because in her building, the foundational skills block was at 1 p.m. And she was fighting to have it in the morning, and then once they did change it, everybody was mad at her for talking up because it ruined the schedule. And so, here she is trying to do right by these kids. And then she got blamed because the schedule change was not something that the adults in the room wanted. So I know we're all shaking our heads. If you're listening to this podcast, we're all shaking our heads. So did any of you ever experience that where you spoke up for whether it's a schedule change in time, or for a kid to maybe have, more support during the day, and then people, it could have been administrators or other teachers, were upset with you because, boy, you just kind of ruined it for all of us. I'd love to hear if you have an experience like that.
I don't have a particular experience with that necessarily to that degree, or to that precise example that you're giving, Faith. But I do get a lot of people who are saying, like, you take it too serious. You take the job too serious. You got to calm down. Just come in and do your thing and go home. I've never had it where I had the power to shift something. Kudos to her that she was able to get the schedule changed. They would probably blow me off. But the thing is, at the end of the day, education, we're civil servants. We are civil servants, and we are there to serve the children. Education is not a jobs creator. They're not there to create, we're opening up the factory here and it's going to be 100 jobs. We're supposed to be there for the children, not the opposite way, where we're making schedules more comfortable for teachers and for administrators. That is not why we got into this. But yeah, there are a lot of people who, I guess no matter where you are, right, Faith, at Walmart, they'll say, don't stock the shelf so fast, slow down so the rest of us don't look so bad.
Yeah, so Sherry, you got to unmute.
Yeah, I was trying to find the mic. One of my issues here lately, right, has been that this work doesn't seem like it's focused on the children first. That's been one of my big things since I've been on this journey for the last 5 years. That the choices that we're making aren't always in the best interest of the students. They're more so in the best interest of the adults in the school building, right? And that's a major concern for me. Anytime we're making decisions and they're not in the best interest of students, there's something wrong with the decision that's been made. Whether it's a schedule, whether it's the timing of something, whether it's even down to the curriculum and programs that are being chosen. And when they're not in the best interest of students, we are not doing the best. We're not doing what they deserve. And it's for me, deserve.
If I could just chime in, I have actually the opposite experience. My teachers and I pioneered to really redesign our literacy block, and we fought. We didn't fight. It wasn't like a fight, but maybe it was a fight. We really advocated for what we know the kids need, and we are so proud of our journey as teachers and as a team, because we are starting things right now in September that we didn't have last year at this time. And it is such an amazing feeling going into my classrooms right now and seeing that we actually did allocate time for small group instruction, that we actually are allocating time. We do GEODs in our school, which is also a shared reading experience. And we're doing that right now in September. So I could only imagine how those shifts are going to impact student outcomes. Because if we started these important attention to the foundational skills 6 months earlier than the prior year, that's going to win. And I think the greatest way that we can motivate leaders to make those changes is when we start seeing shifts in outcomes, which I am confident we will see. Because the truth is, the more attention we give to kids and the more time we give them to actually read, it's going to make an impact, and read the right materials and get the right instruction. So I have to say, I think that collaboratively, in numbers, you can make a difference. Coaches, teachers, administrators team up together. And if you're seeing you don't like your literacy block, don't be afraid to say, hey, this is what I think needs to happen. And I think the biggest way you could really make a difference with leaders, and I think Faith and I talk about it, she's like, ground those discussions in data. Data doesn't lie, because then it's not just your opinion anymore, but it becomes grounded in data. It's factual information. If you have 27% of kids reading on grade level, that data is not good. So unless you really get serious about looking at your literacy block, because the truth of it is a lot of schools are very like, let's look at the standards, R2, R3, whatever, FU, whatever. But no, I'm serious. And it pisses me off, because you know what? A lot of administrators are so attached to speaking about the standards, but you know what? We know that understanding is important. We know that knowledge building is important, but the same respect needs to be given to the foundational skills, because if kids can't lift those words off the page and do it on their own, by third or fourth grade, we're not getting as far as we should. So please, schools, start giving the same respect to the foundational skills portion of your literacy block as you do to the knowledge building and strategy work that's happening as well.
But kudos to your leadership, Judy, for empowering you and your team, right? If I could say anything to leadership tonight, it would be you have to empower your team and consider the needs of your teachers as they are your true human resources, and look at those human resources and say, what does my 5-year teacher need? What does my 20-year veteran teacher need? What can they bring to the table for these children?
Sherry?
Can I mention a school district here in Georgia that I'm really loving, that I see doing the work? And I've seen them for the last 3 years. Marietta City Schools has just, what I really like about Marietta City Schools is they've made sure their teachers are trained, right? They made sure they use the data and started to make adjustments in their school district. But now they've moved on to trying to see what they can do with the middle school students. And that's been one of my concerns, right? If we're going to make all these changes for our elementary school students, what are we doing for all those kids that have already moved on, carrying their struggles? We know that they exist. We know that they have. What are we doing? Are we looking at the other grade levels? Or are we just expecting them to just move on through and graduate to what, right? There are 48 million functionally illiterate Americans in this country. It's gone up. In 5 years since I started my journey, it's gone up 6 million.
And
So
Faith, I feel like you just did a podcast about the college kids.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually,
Or is it coming?
we are going to do 2 episodes this month for Dyslexia Awareness Month on adolescent literacy. So we have some really great shows coming up. We're going to have, the Murphys on. And you'll get to meet them. They are in Ireland. And then we have Trisha Miller from the UK, and she's going to join us on adolescent literacy as well. Really expert people with a lot of great ideas and a lot of excellent things to say. So I want to just, a couple of things were said here. When Dawn, when you were talking, and people were telling you just like chill out. It almost reminded me when a husband turns around to a wife and tells her to relax, and you just want to punch them. Like when, you know what I mean? Like when they said, just relax.
Relax.
And you're like, what? Like the word relax in that mode, it almost makes you not relaxed, right? It's very upsetting when someone tells you to relax in the moment, right? And then it also reminded me of a principal I had when I first started teaching, and I was young and naive, and I was also trying to advocate for some of the students and about the books that they should be using. And he turned around and he said to me, "What's the colloquial?" I'll never forget it. "What's the colloquial expression? Cool it."
Yeah.
I'll never forget it. And this is going back years and years ago. And so it was basically like, know your place. Like, you're in the classroom, you're a teacher, cool it. And I'll never forget that either. But to wrap up, I want to mention.
And can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
You definitely have not cooled it. You are so badass. I mean, she makes the word badass like exist. Like if you look in the dictionary and look up the word badass, it probably says Faith Borkowski.
I'll take that as a compliment. All right. I'm in good company here. But there was another person on social media, this woman, Sandra, and she was on my High Five Literacy page. And I've known Sandra just from seeing her name. And, you know, I've never met her, but she saw this topic and she jumped in and had something to say. And I thought it was very interesting because she said that she also would get into trouble with her administrators for trying to do the right thing and help kids. She said, but here's what turns it around for her. Kind of what you said, Judy, success. When you show success, it can change things, because what she said was she was so successful because she knew the science of reading and she was using it even though she wasn't supposed to be doing certain things with those kids. She was told to kind of keep in line, but she did her own thing because she knew what was right. And because she was successful, parents were requesting her as the teacher. And then as parents requested her, the administrators, although they were kind of slapping her hand and telling her, no, we don't want you to do this, they were bringing people in to watch her as a model. So she was getting these mixed messages. So they're bullying her at one point, but then at the same time, they're bringing people in to watch her teach. It's kind of amazing. And then she also started her own tutoring practice and realized, you know what? I'm making more money doing this than I am in the classroom. And that gave her confidence. And she was like, the hell with it. I'm going to say what I'm going to say. So I thought that was a really interesting story. But the lesson in that is, if we want to try to kind of fight back, I'm saying we as anybody who's been in that situation, if you're being bullied and you're trying to stick up for kids, maybe what she's saying is just be successful. Stand up, be successful, and it's really hard to fight with success. Do any of you have any recommendations for teachers out there listening to this episode that feel very strongly about sticking up for kids and they want to do this? What would you tell them? What would your advice be? It doesn't matter who starts. And this will be kind of our wrap up. Last question.
I really feel like I want to throw out the and Faith, you know about this. I don't know if Judy knows about this, but last year I was a teacher leader policy fellow with Jersey Ken. Sherry, you have Georgia Ken. So they work to train teachers on how to advocate for legislative changes, policy changes. Now, this can be statewide changes, county changes, your school changes, right? But teachers really need to find like-minded people. All of us, I think, here are part of all these Facebook groups and Twitter groups and things like that, because in some ways it can be a lonely journey, and you feel like, I'm learning about this, and maybe you're the only one in your school, and people are looking at you like, why are you getting all worked up about this reading stuff? You got to find your people, and you have to find whatever path that you can to feel empowered. For me, that was like a really big thing, to feel even just one. Listen, there were so many hands at work for this policy change. So I by no means was like, a major facet, but every little person counts, right? Every person advocating, every voice counts. So I would just ask teachers to, fight the good fight as long as you can. It can be really discouraging, but find your people, find your tribe, and just keep at it, because the children, they need us. They really need us. And I think it's sad that, if you look at this screen right now, all of us who are out tutoring on our own found that we could make more of a difference outside of the classroom. I can only beg administrators, tap into the resources that you have, treat teachers like the professionals that they are, and remember that we are all here for the children. Keep your eye on the prize.
So I think one of the things I would say is learn as much as you can. All right. Learn as much as you can about how to improve the work that you do for students. All right. And speak up. Speak up and be ready. All right. Be ready to move. What does it say? There's a saying that's stay ready so you don't have to get ready. All right. Learn what you need to learn to make sure you're helping your students. Speak up and speak out for what you know is right for your students. And if there comes a point where a line is crossed, be ready to step out, because maybe there's something else waiting for you next. There's a next. Okay. And just be ready for that next, because once you get that knowledge, you'll be able to use it someplace else to benefit other children, maybe.
Judy, any advice?
These ladies are amazing. I am obsessed with both of you. You guys were amazing guests. I'm so honored to have met you tonight. I think your words of wisdom say it all. So I'm basically, Faith, if you're not ready, I'm ready to wrap up and give my final words.
I just want to just leave people with this, that Judy, you said about in numbers, trying to do things to change and to show your worth and to get a group of people together. I think that's how people are successful. A lot of the parents out there in these dyslexia groups, they've gotten so far because they form groups and they have each other to lean on and get advice. So I do think it's important for parents. I think it's important for women to lean on each other. Some of these principals are men. Many times
a lot of the teachers are men too, though.
In elementary school, I would say the dynamics are a little bit different. It's mostly women in the classrooms in the elementary school. Up in the upper grades, it changes a little bit. And often, not always, but often there are male principals. And, sometimes that's a little bit hard as well. Just the, standing up for yourself. So I just want to say that we've all been there. And if you're out there, look for other people, look for other women, look for other, people in your position, and you're not alone. That's all I wanted to add. So anybody else have any last words before we wrap up? Okay, Judy, go for it.
All right, follow us on Facebook. Join the Literacy View, Real Teachers Letting Loose. Follow us on Twitter. Faith is at High Five Literacy. I'm at Boxner Judy. And also, please, if you like our episode, share it. That's the biggest gift you could give us, is just share with your friends, your colleagues, your administrators, your teacher friends, your parent friends. Also, now you can advertise with the Literacy View. All the details about how to advertise with the Literacy View are on theliteracyview.com. And if you feel generous and want to help us, because podcasting costs Faith and I money, you can donate to the Literacy View. We've had some really great donors so far, and that really makes our day and has been helpful to sponsor what we're doing, because we're trying to change lives one view at a time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.